Brant DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brant. Visit your local Brant dealer for more information.
Well, there's a lot happening in cattle politics this week with the announcement, quite abruptly, that Alberta Beef Producers is made the decision to withdraw its membership from the Canadian Cattle Association. We talked earlier this week with the chair of ABP, and now we're going to talk to the president of CCA, and it is Tyler Fulton. He is a rancher from Birtle, Manitoba. Tyler, it is great to chat with you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, interesting times, I guess, is one way of describing it. But I appreciate the opportunity to share exactly what's happening for all of our stakeholders.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess off the top, when did CCA find out that ABP was making this decision?
Yeah, really, it was early this week. I understand following a special delegate meeting that they had. They called an emergency meeting, gave us about an hour's notice, and told us that it was their plan to withdraw the membership as of July 1st, 2026. It was a pretty short meeting. Very surprising. And I don't think I need to say it, but really disappointing as well.
So some of the points that ABP has made is that they have concerns about some of the representation in regards to 50 or 55% of the revenue and not enough board seats. Is that something that has come up in the negotiations?
So yeah, I know that Doug had made reference to the interim agreement that CCA and ABP had, in addressing really shortfalls and the problems with respect to like market dynamics and refunding. That ended in July, or that will end in July of 26. And so we were kind of engaged in what the next iteration of this looked like. In particular, our semi-annual meeting is coming up the second week of September. It was, really one of the primary agenda items at that meeting because, we needed to address, honestly, ABP relayed, fairly recently, like in July and June, that they wanted to revisit kind of what the long-term funding arrangement is, and they also said and made mention of the fact that they also think that we have to review and consider changes to the representation that ABP had on CCA.
What about some of the comments regarding transparency? Now, he made it very clear they're not asserting that there's been a misuse of funds there, but they're looking for clarity. And one of the things that he had referenced was I think the need for a finance chair.
Mhm.
Can you talk about what is the structure here? Because I've had a few members of the audience that have said, "Wait a minute, CCA doesn't have a finance chair. What's going on here?" So can you shed some light there?
Yeah. So let me start by saying um, the organizational structure of CCA is really complex. There's several different divisions, some of which are funded by National Checkoff, others that are not. And then of course there's a core part that is charged with advocacy and a portion of that is lobbying. Um, and what what makes it really difficult is because it's such a complicated structure. It makes it difficult. You can't explain it simply. There's just not an easy way to do it, and I think that exacerbated the problem. Rightly so, I think the board of CCA and its members should be should be focused on, what the priorities are of the industry, of the organization, and how to allocate the finite resources that we have to them. And it's generally been kind of split out by, committee. From an accounting standpoint, honestly, 6 times a year, directors get an 80-page really document of our current financials. That's in addition to our audited financial statements, of which part of that has an audit committee, a member audit committee that is struck annually. That's not the same as what the purpose of a finance chair would be, as I've now come to understand it. I think what's really clear to me now is that there was not an obvious avenue to address this. We didn't have a finance committee. We were always just relying on our accounting staff and our controller to provide all this information, because in large part because it is so complex and there's so many nuances to it.
Okay. So is this do you feel that there is an appetite to make alterations to this structure, or is this like a red line, so to speak?
No, not at all. I think it's a legitimate concern. It wasn't obvious, to me as to, how to address it, but I had already started a process of really trying to convert the accounting, data, for lack of a better word, into, usable information to help us make decisions on priorities. And it's something that I really, considered it, of all of my responsibilities, it was one of my top three, and directly related to the ABP funding and organizational structure issue. So totally seems in line with something that we can get behind.
One thing we heard from Doug, chair of ABP, was that he had stated that, I don't want to put, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting him directly, but there was a desire to fix this trajectory, for ABP to not leave CCA, and he even admitted that this is, we're trying to get some attention here. This is a negotiating tactic. He said that. Are you confident that we can reconcile some of the differences here, and we can have a situation where ABP is still a member of CCA in July of 26?
So 100%, that is my desire. And it's early days. I did see the interview that you did with Doug, and I feel much more confident now, because we didn't really have a great deal of context as to what triggered that initial decision. I don't, they've provided some more details, recently, and I don't see any issues, really in trying to work through that. But I want to make it clear that, Alberta is one, of the largest funder of CCA. We also have all the other provinces that contribute themselves. And so, I wouldn't say that CCA has the authority to unilaterally, decide and negotiate. I think it has to involve the other provinces as well. But based on the additional information and context that that they've provided, I am optimistic. I'm really optimistic that we're going to be able to come to a solution to this. And I think that we're motivated. I think both ABP and CCA is motivated to do that, because we think that that's the most effective way to advocate on with a national, a unified national voice.
How did we get to this point? Because what I'm hearing from you is there's been some clarity provided this week, and so I am somewhat curious as to were these concerns not communicated, or maybe this is a different way of putting it, or like what? How did we get to this point this week? In your opinion, obviously you can't speak for them, but you can speak for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked myself that question because it shocked me when we received the news. Um, I think it is fair that we've been in the relationship has been strained because it's been um, um, really a dynamic environment with respect to cattle numbers and cattle and refunding happening in different provinces. And so there's different dynamics at play there. Um, in my mind, we were on track to address this, and it was, I think a goal of the board of directors to really come to a more permanent solution on it. Um, and so it was quite striking to me that they hit the nuclear button the way that they did. Um, but sometimes there's a narrative that develops that says, well, we really need to shake things up. And I think what probably the delegates that were not around the CCA table didn't know is that we were already invested and addressing it as I said, the primary agenda item in our semi-annual meeting.
One of the things that I've heard a lot from the audience, Tyler, is concern if there is not a deal that is made, and I've heard this from a few people out of province, okay, out of Alberta, that have said, okay, what happens to CCA and what happens to, when I say us, I mean those still left as members. What happens to this entity if 55% of the revenue walks out the door?
Yeah. So I think it'd be fair to say, well, it's very fair to say that it's my motivation to work through this and get ABP, back and confident, and address their concerns. Um, but if for some reason they didn't and we couldn't come to some agreement, then I think we'd have to explore some different models or options on how to advocate on behalf of all beef producers in Canada. Um, quite simply, we've received a lot of support, really in the last couple of days, with the sentiment that we'll make sure that you're okay. And, there's obviously some large funders out there, and, the other provinces, there's different measures, but quite simply, it is a worse, we would all be worse off, I think, if CCA wasn't representing, the beef producers of Alberta, because they make up the majority of it. I mean, it's just the reality of it, and it's something across the country that we're all proud of.
Yeah. When is there scheduled talks to happen? I guess what are the next steps from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously really early days, but it is absolutely my desire to kind of engage in this, as this obviously lifts the priority. It was already one of my top three, but I guess we got to juggle the balls, right? And so yeah, I don't want to go into great detail. I spoke with Doug Roxburgh yesterday in person.
Yeah.
We have a really good relationship. He sat on the board of CCA for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. and I really found him to be a thoughtful, engaged, individual that that was willing to share his opinions on things. He doesn't currently sit on CCA, but we've built a relationship, I think, previously, and it's one that I think we can really lever to work through some of these things.
Tyler, I want to thank you for joining us here today. I know that I'm kind of taking you away from probably trying to build the strategy out and plan out what some of the next steps are, but I do appreciate you taking time for the Real Agriculture audience.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. I know that this really kind of shook things up, and it's I want to reassure all of the beef producers across the country that it doesn't change our motivation and our work. We really take pride in advocating and being effective, and so we're motivated to fix this so that we can continue to do that good work.